Hello and welcome back to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. In today's video, we are going to unbox, reveal, discuss, and upgrade the Mishra's Burnished Banner pre-constructed commander deck from the Brothers' War. What's up, MTG BC? That is the MTG Burgeoning community. Welcome back to another pre-constructed deck opening. Today, it's Mishra's Burnished Banner from the Brothers' War. So, we are going to liberate the contents of this box by doing that. Now, there's no going back, folks. There's no going back. We pull out our deck box, and of course, yes, as we usually see, it's already damaged before it comes out of the box. All right, that goes into the recycling bin. Here we have our we have 3 +1/+1 counters of the gold variety. We have a lifelink counter, a trample counter, and a vigilance counter. Where's our divider? Oh, there's that. Look at that awesome divider. And we have 2 gold counters and a flying counter. Pretty nice, pretty snazzy. We'll definitely take that card divider. All right, so we have our damaged deck box. Does anybody ever actually use these bad boys? I do not. All right. Ooh, don't steal. It's not good. It's just not a good thing to do. All right, so we empty out our box. And, of course, we have our life wheel. Yes, we have our This Is How You Play Magic pamphlet. Wait a second. Where's our... Oh, there it is. I was about to say there is our sample collector booster. That will be used for something in the future. And then we have the sweet 100 cards, a Magic Symphony. All right, so let's rip the cellophane off of these 100 plus cards, and let's take a look at those 2 commander options. We're going Grixis Tall with the theme of this deck. And boy, they do not want to come out today, folks. But you know what? They may win a battle or two. Ha ha ha! But MTG Burgeoning always wins the war. All right, 2 commander options. The front-facing and primary option is Mishra, Eminent One. We got a 5/4 Legendary Human Artificer for 2 in Grixis colors. At the beginning of combat on our turn, we create a token that's a copy of target non-creature artifact we control, except its name is Mishra's War Form, and it's a 4/4 construct artifact creature in addition to its other types. It gains haste, and then we have to sack it at the beginning of the next end step. So just by having Mishra on our side of the battlefield, and as long as we have some other artifact, we're going to be able to have an attacker each and every turn just by utilizing this combat trigger. That is the primary. That is Mishra. Our secondary option, Ashnod the Uncaring. And can we just take a moment to really appreciate that foiling on the gold retro border? Oh, man. You may not see a prettier card in all of Magic the Gathering than a gold foiled retro border. All right, getting back to the card here. We have Ashnod, who's a legendary human artificer as well. She's 1/4 with Death Touch for the exact same mana value of 2 and Grixis colors. Whenever we activate an ability of an artifact or creature that is not a mana ability, if 1 or more permanents were sacrificed to activate it, we may copy that ability and we may choose new targets for the copy. Very, very unique and interesting effect to build around. And I emphasize and highlight the build around part of Ashnod's description because for the purposes of this pre-constructed commander deck, primary option Mishra is absolutely the better fit. In a vacuum, comparing these 2 commanders side by side, Ashnod offers such a much better and unique build around dynamic than Mishra, that moving forward in this video, we will stick with Mishra as our primary commander option because he is going to pilot the 99 of this build, but all the while just obsessing and lavishing attention upon Ashnod and what exactly a deck would look around her. In addition to the 2 commander options provided in Mishra's Burnished banner, both of which are brand new cards to the Magic catalog, there are 8 other brand new to Magic cards that are in the 99 of this build, and in this part of the video, we're going to talk about them. The first is Glint Raker, a 1/3 Drake for 3 and a blue mana, and it does have flying. It gets +X/+0, where X is the highest mana value among artifacts we control. Based upon what we got going on in the 99 or what we're planning to put in there, this could get really out of hand. And whenever Glint Raker deals combat damage to a player, we may reveal that many cards from the top of our library and put an artifact card revealed this way into our hand and the rest into our graveyard. Now, for the purposes of this build, Glint Raker is going to fill up our graveyard in a big way, particularly if we have some big-sized mana-costed artifacts on our side of the battlefield. Can you imagine if Glint Raker has a power of like 6 or 7? It hits an opponent, we look at the top 6 or 7 cards of our library, we grab one artifact card, put it into our hand, then dump the rest into our graveyard. Outside of this type of build, this could be a very, very attractive card to add to any kind of Sultai graveyard shenanigan builds, particularly like maybe the Mimeoplasm. He would love to get some more self-milled cards from our deck into the library, from our library into the graveyard. Glint Raker's presence in the 99 of this build is pretty strong, but it also adds additional versatility for what it can do outside of this particular type of artifact build. That makes this a card to keep an eye on moving forward. Next up, we have Terrasiari's Devastation. It's a sorcery for X, 2 and 2 black. We lose X life and create X tapped Power Stone tokens. Then all creatures get -1/-1 till end of turn for each artifact we control. This is pretty much a niche card for any deck that's looking to win the game with black in its color identity and a lot of artifacts on our side of the battlefield. So outside of that, I really don't see the Devastation getting a whole lot of play. In the 99 of this build, it could be potentially devastating to our opponents because it gives us such a huge mana advantage when we think about the number of Power Stone tokens we're going to get to cast our artifact spells, and plus it's going to wipe the board, most likely, of everything on it. So that could do some real heavy lifting in this build. Outside of it, and outside of any artifact-specific builds, I'm not sure you're thinking about putting that in any deck anywhere else. Alright, going from mono blue to mono black to mono red, we have Blast Furnace Hellkite, a 5/5 for 7 and 2 red with flying, and double strike. It also has the Artifact Offering mechanic, which means we may cast the spell as though it had flash by sacrificing an artifact and paying the difference in mana cost between this and the sacrificed artifact. Mana cost also includes color. So for the purposes of this deck, we could flash this bad boy onto the battlefield at any time by sacrificing one of our artifacts, paying a ridiculously reduced cost. Maybe we can get this down to just red, and then we have a 5/5 flying double striker that, let's see that last line of text because that's the one that we want to really focus on. Creatures attacking our opponents have double strike. So we have here the ultimate gotcha ambush card. We can cast this and flash it into play with its artifact offering right after our opponent decides to declare, no blocks, and then suddenly that opponent is going to take double the damage that they thought they were taking. This has a lot of practicality in a lot of different decks, particularly because even though the artifact offering specifically makes it an artifact that has to be sacrificed, that could be a Soul Ring in other non-artifact laden builds. Blast Furnace Hellkite is also one of those cards to keep an eye on, similar to Glint Raker. Sticking with mono red, we're going to go Farid, Enterprising Salvager, a 3/3 legendary human soldier for 2 and 1 red mana. Whenever a non-token artifact we control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, we create a colorless artifact token named Scrap. We can pay 1 and 1 red mana, sacrifice an artifact, and choose one of the following 3 modes. We can put a +1/+1 counter on Farid, and it gains menace until end of turn. We can goad target creature, hence those goad counters earlier in the video, or we can discard a card and draw a card. So we're going to make Farid bigger and give him menace. We're going to goad one of our creatures, or we're going to do a little rummaging. Those are a pretty good set of abilities, and I like the fact that Farid is a legendary creature, which allows us to build around it as a potential commander. A lot of interesting synergies could happen with a commander like that, and I look forward to tinkering with that in the future. All right, shifting from colored spells to our first traditional artifact, we have Machine God's Effigy. Okay, it's an artifact for 4. When it ETBs, it does so as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it's an artifact, and it has tap, add a blue mana. It's not a creature. Let that sink in for a moment. Machine God's Effigy is going to come into play. It's going to copy a creature, but it's not going to be a creature. It's going to stay as an artifact, but it's going to have all of the abilities of that creature. So it will have all of its enter the battlefield abilities. It'll have all of its combat abilities, similar to, as we slide the card to the right a little bit, similar to the abilities presented on Blast Furnace Hellkite. Creatures attacking our opponents have double strike. This being an artifact and not a creature will keep it away from any creature-specific board wipes or removal. Not that there aren't artifact removal spells running aplenty in the Commander format, but let's face it, there are many more creature removal spells than there are artifacts. And as a bonus, we can turn this sideways for 1 blue mana. Very, very sneaky good card Machine God's Effigy is going to become, particularly because it does act as a mana rock. It's a highly priced mana rock at just 4, giving us the blue mana. But being able to copy that ability, that's something that could be really exploited if you think about all of the different types of perverse builds we can put around a card like Machine God's Effigy. Next artifact, this time it's an artifact creature. It's Scavenged Brawler, a 6/6 construct. I'm sorry, not a 6/6 construct. It's a construct for 6 mana. That's a 4/4. It has Flying, Vigilance, Trample, and Lifelink. So that's 4 keyword abilities and a 4/4 for 6 mana. Gone are the days of hankering and longing for a Chroma Angel of Wrath. All right, so we can also pay 5 generic mana. We can exile Scavenged Brawler from our graveyard, and then we can choose target creature. Notice it right there. It's choose target creature. It does not have to be a creature that we control. So we can pick one of our opponent's creatures if needed for the purposes of possibly politicking at the commander table. And when we choose that creature and we pay that 5 mana and we exile Scavenged Brawler, that creature gets 4 +1/+1 counters, a flying counter, a vigilance counter, a trample counter, and a lifelink counter. Now, granted, we can only do this anytime we could cast a sorcery, but we could really, really use this in a lot of different ways. Its versatility is off the charts just because we can put it on our own creatures, or we can form an alliance with one of our opponents to perhaps take down an opponent that's really taking control of the game, or just one of those blue mages. All right, we got 2 new cards left to discuss, and the second last one is Smelting Vat. It has a CMC of 4. We can pay 1 generic mana, tap it, and sacrifice another artifact, and we reveal the top 8 cards of our library. We put up to 2 non-creature artifact cards with total mana value less than or equal to the sacrificed artifact's mana value from among them onto the battlefield, and the rest on the bottom of our library in a random order. So what this is saying is I can be put into a commander deck that has a lot of different artifacts. That's what you want to do with me. Get me into that deck. but I really can't go in anything else. So that kind of makes Smelting Vat a little bit of a niche card because we're really only going to be able to utilize it and its abilities, in an artifact-heavy build. And number 10, card number 10, the last new card from Mishra's Burnished banner, and it is Wondrous Crucible. Here we have an artifact for 7 generic mana for this artifact. We better get a heck of a lot back for this mana investment. Permanents we control have Ward 2. That's a pretty good way to pay us back for investing 7 into this artifact. At the beginning of our end step, we mill 2 cards, and then we exile a non-land card at random from our graveyard. We copy it, and we may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. 7 mana is not a small investment, but we all know the Commander format is ripe with decks that can produce big-time mana, and the fact that this is just 7 generic mana means that it has a spot in any one of those decks. And as long as we have the ability to take advantage of getting those cards from our graveyard onto our side of the battlefield by casting the copy that's exiled, by copying the card that's exiled with Wondrous Crucible, again, it's randomized, then we really do have a way in which to take great advantage of this artifact. This could be one of those cards that we could heavily exploit in the future and not just leave it here languishing in the 99 of a pre-constructed commander deck. Keep an eye on Wondrous Crucible. 7 mana is a lot, but we're in a format where we can generate so much more. Alright, so those are the 10 brand new to Magic cards offered from the Mishra's Burnished banner pre-constructed commander deck. So that means we have 90 reprints to go over, and here are all of the non-land reprints that you'll find in this deck. We begin with a favorite, Fact or Fiction. Of course, if it's blue and you're looking at graveyards, you gotta have a Fact or Fiction. Thirst for Knowledge will do the exact same, well, not the exact same thing, but it's putting cards into our hand and getting cards into the graveyard. Braid for some removal, flexible removal. Oh, there's that gold retro border. Boy, Expressive Iteration. That didn't take too long to get a reprint here, did it? Oh, and Oni Cult Anvil. Boy, what is this? A meeting of the Standard Revival? I'll tell you, those 2 cards had some fun while they were in Standard. No doubt about it. All right, Dreamstone. Let me reframe that, because Oni Cult Anvil still is in Standard. Yeah, that's still in Standard. Expressive Iteration got banned out of it. All right, Dreamstone Hedron. Yeah, tap for some mana, draw some cards, of course. Felwar Stone. Now that is the retro artifact border that just looks so awesome, like we saw earlier with the new ones. That's going to go right over there in the sweet reprints for the coffers. Hedron Archive, of course, because if we have a Dreamstone Hedron, we got to have a Hedron Archive. The Icor Wellspring, of course, because of the back and forth with an ETBing and getting into the graveyard. Mindstone, Mana Rock. Very, very underloved Mindstone is. Very much so. The Servo Schematic. Okay, I'm not too familiar with this card. When an ETB is put into a graveyard, create a 1/1 Servo. Okay, so this is going to be pretty much like the Icor Wellspring. Oh, there's that Soul Ring. Thran Dynamo. That looks just like it did during the Urza block. The set symbol is different, but boy, it looks exactly the same. Excellent print there, Wizards. Very well done. Mnemonic Sphere. Okay, you're going to draw some cards. You're going to get some more cards drawn. That's just a card drawing artifact right there. Very nice. You get to sacrifice it, draw some cards. Draw some more cards with Thoughtcast, of course. Feed the Swarm. That enchantment removal in black. I'm telling you, that was a godsend from the gods of Magic. Feed the Swarm. Enchantment removal. So important. All right, Executioner's Capsule, another artifact that wants to get into the graveyard and then come back. Faithless Looting, draw 2, discard 2, then do it again. Arcane Signet with the retro border, very, very nice. Commander Sphere, very popular. The Dimir Signet. Boy, it took many, many moons for that to become a regular reprint in these pre-constructed commander decks. You can take my word for it, MTGBC. That is not something that came very, very frequently. Mycosynth Wellspring, of course, because it's an artifact that wants to get into the battlefield or the graveyard, and this is the deck to do that. The Nihil Spellbomb, yep, the Prophetic Prism. Again, these are ones that we want to copy. ETB, LTB triggers, Rakdos Signet, the Wayfarer's Bauble, and the retro border. Oh, Muzzio from Conspiracy. Of course, because it's an artifact deck with blue, we're going to have Muzzio in there. Geth, Lord of the Vault. Man, some very, very bad things can be done with Geth on our side of the battlefield. A great, great creature to see in this Grixis build. Herald of Anguish. How perfect is that with the improvised mechanic and the number of artifacts that we have on our side of the battlefield that we can tap to help cast this that don't take away from anything that we're doing with those artifacts. We can get a 5/5 flyer for 2 black mana. At the beginning of our end step, each opponent's going to discard a card. Amazing. And plus, specifically in this type of build, with how many different artifacts and artifact token synergies there are, sacrificing an artifact to give target creature -2/2. Let's get some utility creatures off the battlefield. Some pesky commanders into the command zone. Sneaky, sneaky good play, Herald of Anguish. Retro Joyra, she is just owning it. She is the captain. She is weatherlighting it left and right, and she is just absolutely owning it. And you should, girl. You absolutely should. Silas Wren, reprint from the Commander 2016 sets. Oh, those decks, those 5 pre-constructed decks from Commander 2016 still, and most likely will always be, the best cycle of decks of all time. The first ever 4-color legends, the partner mechanic, the amazing number of reprints in those decks. If only we could go back to that time. Those decks were the absolute best. Now, here is a card that really surprised me for its reprint status so soon after being in Zendikar Rising just a little more than 2 years ago. Now, I always thought that Lithoform Engine would end up becoming the most valuable card from that set just because of what it can do, all of the different abilities, the versatility, and the fact that it can go in any single deck. Well, being reprinted here probably is going to dash that theory somewhat because, well, now we have it a second time in just a little over 2 years. Lithoform Engine, it is an amazing card. It is my favorite card from Zendikar Rising. Emry from Throne of Eldraine, of course. Master Transmuter, because let's get an artifact that we want to enter the battlefield back into our hand, and then put another artifact that we want onto our hand onto the battlefield. Master Transmuter will do that all day long and twice on Friday Night Magic. All right, Padim will give all of our artifacts hexproof. That's fantastic. The Workshop Elders. Now, the CMC of 7 is a bit high, but giving artifact creatures we control evasion, that is very, very powerful and could be considered a game ender. It's just that 7 mana is a lot for a 4/4. That's a lot. Feign the Broker, sure, all of those different abilities, 3 different tap abilities, all that synergize with what we're doing in this deck, plus the ability to untap him. Nice placement of Feign in this deck. The Audacious Reshapers, sure. Blasphemous Act and that sweet retro border. Not even the original Innistrad version is nicer than that card. Oh, same thing with that Chaos Warp. Love that red. Look at that. Cursed Mirror already getting another reprint. And in that retro border, oh, love the Cursed Mirror. Oh, of course, if it's an artifact-heavy deck and there's red in it, you're going to see Hellkite Igniters at some points. Yes, you most certainly will. Nice placement there. And something to keep in mind, when activating the Hellkite Igniter's ability, you can do so multiple times. You don't just have to activate it one time. You can jam 6 total mana into that. As long as 3 of it is red, as long as at least 3 of it is red, you can plus X plus 0 that dude 3 times. And in this kind of deck, you swing once and that's game over for one of our opponents. Slowbad. Of course, Slowbad is going to be in here. Oh, look at that. Guilds of Ravnica, Ravnica Allegiance, Devil, and the retro gold border. Oh, just breathtaking. Oh, man. Brutaclad in the retro border. Yep. Idol of Oblivion. Sure. Oh, of course, the Metalwork Colossus is going to be in this build. You just knew that was going to happen. Mirrorworks. Sneaky, under the radar card for this type of deck, but it is an absolute bomb if you can get it onto the battlefield and you got the mana open to copy the non-token artifacts that are coming into play for you. Oh, especially in a build like this where so many of them ETB and then LTB and you get the benefits off of it. Nice card. Mirrorworks is Oblivion Stone. Boy, that's been reprinted back to pretty much the Stone Age now after its initial printing in one of the pre-constructed commander decks many moons ago. Boy, it went years and years, and now it seems like it comes out a couple times a season. All right, Spine of Isha, sure, because artifacts are coming into play and they're leaving. Another Strionic Resonator. Love that artwork. Very cool. Trading Post, because why not get some goats onto our side of the battlefield? And our last non-land reprint, it's Traxos Scourge of Krug. So, the reprints, in addition to the new cards, similar to what we talked about during the Urza's Alliance pre-constructed deck opening, a little underwhelming. We have our crop of usual commander staples with the mana rocks and some removal. But let's be honest, outside of a couple of hits that might take place with respect to Machine God's Effigy, Wondrous Crucible, and and Glint Raker, underwhelming. I feel the same about this deck that I do with Urza's Alliance, is that the 99 and the commanders as a whole, I just feel underwhelmed. All right, now let's take a look at the land base that we have here in this Mishra's Burnished Banner pre-constructed deck from, of course, the Brothers' War. Now, we're talking about retro bordering here, and again, similar to what we saw in Urza's Iron Alliance, the retro bordering here is not eliciting the nostalgia that I seem to remember back from the time of the 1990s, and that is just not hitting it for me, folks. That is not the retro border that I have come to know and own from the basic lands back during the 1990s and early 2000s. But it is what it is. This is what we've got. So we've got 5 basic islands to go around to go with 4 basic swamps and 4 basic mountains to give us a total of 13 basic lands to start for the land base. Now, in moving away from the basics to the best land in our format, we have just a border that's just too dark. It's too dark, folks. It's too dark. But we have a command tower, and it's the best land in our format. Then we have a Crumbling Necropolis, which, for all intents and purposes, is command tower number 2, but it ETB's tapped, and if available, Reflecting Pool would be a fantastic replacement for this card. Next, we have Path of Ancestry. Now, this comes into play tapped, but it does give us one mana of the colors we need to cast our spells, because it does act as Command Tower version 3.0, and if we use that mana to cast a creature spell that is either a human or an artificer, we get to scry 1. But if you look at the pre-constructed deck list of this build, there are not many actual creatures in this build. This is a lot heavier with artifacts than it is artifact creatures. So for the purposes of tempo, Path of Ancestry might be a card that we look to be replaced by maybe a City of Brass or a Mana Confluence if those cards are available for the purposes of maintaining tempo, because I don't think it's worth it to have it come into play tapped if we can't utilize the scry ability as a way in which to hedge against the loss of tempo. So your call to make. That's what I would do. And lastly, there's our Exotic Orchard, blue, black, red. It seems reasonable that we could tap this for 2 of those colors. Maybe if we're lucky, all 3. All right, I got a little bit of a glare going on over here. That's why I don't usually put any of the cards to the left, because that glare could be very off-putting. All right, that's better. So we've got our basics, we've got our lands that can tap for reasonably all of the colors that we need. Now let's talk about some synergy lands. The following are all artifact lands that we have here in the 99. We have each of the monocolor lands, the Seat of the Synod, the Vault of Whispers, and the Great Furnace. Again, those retro borders, they're too dark, Wizards. Come on. You blew it on the lands. You did beautiful with the artifacts. You did beautiful with the gold. You missed it with the lands. You did. All right, so 3 more artifact lands. We got the duels here. So we got our Izzet land here, our Dimir, and our Rakdos. They're all going to come into play tapped, but they are artifact lands, so they will help to synergize with the artifact theme that we have woven in this pre-constructed deck. Now let's talk about some fixing, because although those last 3 artifact lands can tap for one of 2 different colors of mana, we're going to need more than that as a way in which to cast our spells comfortably and activate our abilities, because we are playing 3 colors, and even though there are a lot of artifact spells in this deck, we don't want to be losing our colors when we have to cast some of our removal spells or our commander or some of the other cards that we have in the 99 that are going to require that colored mana. So this is what we have offered in the land base for this deck. We have 1 battle land, just 1. We have Smoldering Marsh. Absent is the Dimir Battleland. Where is Sunken Ruins? Why is that card not here? We have the black-red. We have the Rakdos Battleland, but where's the Dimir one? That seems like it would have been a much better choice than giving us Shadowblood Ridge, or than giving us Darkwater Catacombs. Yeah, they're filter lands, but by themselves, they can't tap for anything. We need mana in order to activate these lands, which, let's face it, could put us into a spot if we're trying to maintain tempo or leave up optimal mana to activate one of our abilities or cast one of our instants during one of our opponent's turns. And just like Urza's Alliance, we have all 3 of the temples. They're all there. They ETB tapped. They let us scry 1 when they do so. But again, in your land storage coffers at home, if you have any check lands or slow lands or shock lands or anything that could be utilized to replace these temples, I would do so as priority number 1 as a way in which to optimize the land base of this pre-constructed build. In addition to those 3 lands that come into play tapped and the 3 artifact dual lands that come into play tapped, we also have each of the appropriate Rue lands that are going to come into play tapped. Now, they're going to ETB tapped. We have to bounce one of our lands that are already on the battlefield, or this one if we choose to do so, back to our hand. It does tap for 2 mana, but we are losing some tempo because we're putting a land back into our hand. This isn't a landfall build, folks, so we're not going to benefit by doing that. And maybe it would be better to find some more lands that would be better and efficient than the Rue lands in this particular build, because tempo is going to be a thing, because we do not want to fall behind our opponents. All right, a few lands left to talk about. No Evolving Wilds, but we have Evolving Wilds' little brother, Terramorphic Expanse. It does everything Evolving Wilds does, including not get played in most commander decks. Again, if you have a Fabled Passage or a Prismatic Vista or maybe a fetch land, that would be a fantastic choice to replace Terramorphic Expanse. Myriad Landscape, another land that's going to come into play tapped that does give us colorless mana, but the ETB of it coming into play tapped, and we get to pay 2 to sacrifice for up to 2 basic lands that share a land type. We're in a 3-color deck, so having Myriad Landscape is not really the best bang for our mana buck, because if we do activate it, we can only get the same land. So we're only getting either 2 mountains, 2 swamps, or 2 islands, and maybe we need 1 of each. So Myriad Landscape might be one of those lands that could be on the chopping block if you have better options at home. And then we have Ash Barrens. It gives us a colorless mana, but more often than not, we're going to pay 1 to basic land cycle it, so we can get one of the aforementioned basic lands into our hand. 2 utility lands left. The last, Buried Ruin, very, very good card to keep in the 99 of this particular kind of build, because we can sacrifice it to get any artifact from our graveyard and put it right into our hand. And lastly, card number 100, and the last land of this build, a very off-putting looking Reliquary Tower. Wizards, what happened here with these lands? I was excited that the retro were coming back, but I don't know if this is a retro modernized version of a Reliquary Tower. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not loving it. Now, granted, it still does what a Reliquary Tower does, but for aesthetics, the land base is not doing it for me. From a functionality standpoint, the land base is not doing it for me. It's the same thing as it was for Urza's Iron Alliance. The land base is lacking both visually and from an efficient standpoint. And here we have the rest of the contents of the Mishra's Burnished Banner pre-constructed deck from the Brothers' War. We have our near impossible to curl, ultra thick foily version of our primary commander, Mishra Eminent One. That bad boy is never going to curl because it's just too thick to do so. And I'm not talking thick with the double C's. All right, and the tokens that we have. Servo, Mishra's War Form. Hang on to this token because you all know that those specialized individual tokens that sometimes come in the commander decks are very hard to come by in the future because they just never get reprinted. So hold on to your Mishra's War Form. A copy. Scrap token, same thing. Hold on to those scrap tokens, even though we got a couple of them here. That goat has always got that boot in the mouth. Construct, another copy. A garbage card. And we flip over for our Power Stone, a Phyrexian Mirror token. That's from Brutaclad. Construct, Power Stone, another Phyrexian Mirror, Power Stone, an Inkling token. Yay, it flies. A couple of those. A Power Stone and the Idol of Oblivion Eldrazi token. And there you have it, MTG BC. We have unboxed, revealed, and discussed the contents of the Mishra's Burnished Banner pre-constructed commander deck from the Brothers' War. Well, now it's time to upgrade it.
Mishra's Burnished Banner is a Grixis deck that features a Go Tall artifact strategy that looks to win games with imposing artifact creatures. With this dynamic in mind, and with the front-facing commander, Mishra Eminent One, as our general, the following cards are some possible upgrades to the original deck list, each of which enhances the Go Tall artifact strategy of this build. Since this deck is artifact-centric, let's take advantage of that by out-resourcing our opponents and play with a copy of Storm the Vault. Its treasure token-producing ability aside, transforming this enchantment into Vault of Catlacan should be easier than Sunday morning. Once we do, we get a land that either taps for 1 mana of any color, or taps to add blue mana to our mana pool equal to the number of artifacts we control. This second mana ability is Tolarian Academy, a very powerful land that is banned in the Commander format. This glut of mana should propel us ahead of our opponents by eventually overwhelming the board. Reckless Weaver deals 1 point of damage to each opponent whenever an artifact enters our side of the battlefield. With this addition, we take advantage of what this build aims to accomplish, getting artifacts and artifact creatures into play. Speaking of creatures, this build has the ability to create artifact creature tokens, so let's take advantage of this by including a copy of Determined Iteration. This enchantment allows us to populate at the beginning of combat on our turn and create a hasty token of a creature token we already control. It's exiled at the beginning of the next end step, but it can attack right away. Speaking of attacking, since combat is the primary path to victory in this deck, let's include some creatures to make this path easier to traverse. Kappa Cannoneer synergizes wonderfully with this build. Its improvised mechanic ensures that we pay a reduced mana cost to cast it. We easily should be able to cast this 4/4 for just 1 blue mana. Its Ward 4 is a beefy tax for an opponent to target it, and whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under our control, it gets a +1/+1 counter and can't be blocked this turn. In a deck that wants to put numerous artifacts into play and send big artifact creatures into combat, Kappa Cannoneer is a perfect fit for the 99. Keeping the combat train running is Reaver Titan. When this 10/10 vehicle attacks, it deals 5 damage to each opponent, and it also has protection from mana value 3 or less. This protection shields Reaver Demon from many forms of spot removal and prevents it from being chump blocked, especially by creature tokens. Its crew cost of 4 is a bit high, but the return on that investment is even higher. When Knight Paladin enters the battlefield, it deals 4 damage to each opponent. It is a 6/6 with trample and has a crew cost of only 1. With so many abilities that create creature tokens and token copies inundating the 99 of this build, Knight Paladin's worth can be measured solely by its ETB trigger and presence on the battlefield. Thunderhawk Gunship has a litany of different abilities. When it ETBs, we create 2/2/2 white Astartes warrior creature tokens with vigilance. These creature tokens could crew the gunship or any of the other aforementioned vehicles. Whenever this 6/6 with flying attacks, attacking creatures we control gain flying until end of turn. Enabling evasion to a slew of big creatures helps us to achieve victory even quicker. Our path to victory is through combat, but including some additional artifact-driven win conditions can cause a heightened level of concern for our opponents. Mirrodin Besiege can accentuate our artifact theme by creating a 1/1 mirror artifact creature token whenever we cast an artifact spell. Or it can make an opponent lose the game if we have 15 or more artifact cards in our graveyard at the beginning of our end step, a feat that should be easily achievable in this build. Rise and Shine can be a come-out-of-nowhere win condition that completely surprises our opponents. By paying its overload cost, each non-creature artifact we control becomes a 0/0 artifact creature and gets 4 +1/+1 counters. With well over 30 non-creature artifacts in the 99 of this deck, overloading a Rise and Shine can be game-ending. Also using our artifact-laced deck as advantageously as possible, Tezzeret, Master of the Bridge, has a +2 loyalty ability that deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of artifacts we control. We also gain X life. This is on top of providing affinity to our creatures, artifact recursion, and an ultimate ability that can advance our board state well past our opponents. Tezzeret, Master of the Bridge, is the first card I would add to the 99 of this build for the purposes of upgrading its power level.